Jasmine Crockett's voice cut through the room like a thunderclap, sharp and unrelenting. She slammed her palm against the polished mahogany desk, the sound ricocheting off the walls. Cameras flashed, reporters leaned forward, and somewhere, in the packed gallery, a lone gasp echoed louder than the rest. Across from her sat Tulsi Gabbard. Unshaken, her hand raised ever so slightly as if signaling the storm to pass. Her expression was unreadable, her composure almost unsettling. Against Jasmine's fiery outburst, "Are you seriously questioning my record?" Jasmine's words dripped with indignation, her tone daring anyone to challenge her authority. But Tulsi didn't flinch. At that exact moment, headlines were already exploding online. Tulsi Gabbard just called out Jasmine Crockett. Live, and the internet is losing its mind. Outside the chamber, hashtags ignited, tweets flew, and millions were glued to their screens. But inside the room, time felt suspended. The tension was suffocating. Reporters whispered frantically, scrambling to capture every detail. Cameras zoomed tighter on Tulsi's face, waiting, begging for her response. Jasmine leaned forward, eyebrows arched, lips curling into a smirk as if she had already won the exchange. And then Tulsi lowered her hands slowly, leaned into the mic, and said in a steady, deliberate tone, "Jasmine, this isn't about you. This is about the people you serve." The words sliced through the silence, the weight behind them impossible to ignore. A ripple spread through the audience, murmurs, gasps, even a few audible chuckles. Jasmine froze for the briefest moment, her confident facade cracking ever so slightly. But Tulsi wasn't done. Her gaze locked on Jasmine's, unblinking, unwavering, almost surgical in its precision. In that instant, every eye in the room shifted the balance of power, tipping without a single raised voice. Outside, phones buzzed with live notifications. Inside, the air felt electric, heavy with the sense that something historic was unfolding. And just as Jasmine opened her mouth to fire back, Tulsi inhaled softly, ready to deliver her next line. No one expected Tulsi's next words. Not even Jasmine herself. The silence in the chamber didn't last long. Within seconds, whispers erupted like sparks in dry grass. Reporters traded glances, fingers racing across keyboards. Everyone knew what had just happened, but no one knew where. It was heading. Tulsi Gabbard's calm rebuke had cracked open something far larger than a personal clash. This wasn't just another committee argument. This was the boiling point of months of tension, policy fights, ideological rifts, and two political powerhouses locked in an unavoidable collision course. For weeks, Jasmine Crockett had been making headlines with her fiery speeches, unfiltered interviews, and unapologetic approach to identity politics. Her supporters praised her as bold and fearless, while her critics accused her of being reckless and divisive. Every appearance she made seemed designed to provoke, and it worked. Cable news loved her. Social media amplified her. She was impossible to ignore. Tulsi, on the other hand, had been charting a different path. Away from the noise and theatrics, she was quietly building momentum, an independent voice appealing to progressives, moderates, and disillusioned voters alike. Her military background, bipartisan record, and unwavering composure had earned her respect across ideological lines. In a political arena obsessed with soundbites, Tulsi's deliberate style was her greatest weapon. And yet, here they were on opposite sides of the same table, embodying two visions of America's future. This wasn't about a single policy. It was about identity, freedom, and dignity, about who gets to define what it means to represent the people. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Jasmine, her fiery persona was her strength, but it also left her vulnerable. Every outburst fed critics who questioned her temperament and judgment. For Tulsi, this confrontation was an opportunity, a chance to expose contradictions, challenge narratives, and redefine the conversation. But what no one realized, not Jasmine, not the committee, not the millions watching online, was that Tulsi had come prepared for this moment. Beneath her calm expression was a carefully built case, a series of facts and revelations that would shift the balance of the entire debate. Phones buzzed across Washington. Newsrooms went into overdrive. The country was watching, waiting, anticipating, and Tulsi knew it. She glanced at Jasmine, then back at the committee chair, her hand resting lightly on a folder she hadn't opened yet. The tension was unbearable. What Tulsi revealed next left Washington speechless. Before this confrontation, Jasmine Crockett had already carved out a reputation as one of the most polarizing figures in Washington. To her supporters, she was a fearless warrior, unafraid to challenge authority, speak uncomfortable truths, and dismantle what she saw as outdated systems of power. To her critics, she was impulsive, volatile, and dangerously unpredictable. And both sides agreed on one thing: Jasmine Crockett never backed down from a fight. Her rise to prominence was nothing short of meteoric. A former civil rights attorney, she entered politics with the energy of someone who believed she could change the world, and she made sure everyone knew it. Cameras loved her, microphones chased her, and her fiery soundbites became instant headlines. It wasn't long before Jasmine became a staple on cable news panels, a trending name on Twitter, and a fixture in political talk shows. But her rapid ascent came with turbulence. Jasmine thrived on confrontation, and controversy seemed to follow her wherever she went. In one committee hearing earlier this year, she delivered a blistering takedown of a colleague's stance on immigration policy, calling his views not just wrong, but shameful. The clip went viral overnight, earning her millions of views and a legion of new supporters who praised her courage and authenticity. Yet, behind every wave of praise came an equal storm of backlash. Critics accused her of grandstanding, chasing viral moments rather than meaningful solutions. Some colleagues privately complained that Jasmine's combative style alienated allies and fractured delicate negotiations. Even some within her own party worried that her confrontational tactics were undermining long-term goals. Still, Jasmine refused to change. Her unfiltered approach wasn't a flaw in her eyes, it was her identity. She believed that in an era of carefully curated political messaging, authenticity was her greatest weapon. "I say what people are thinking, but are too afraid to say," she once declared in a nationally televised interview. Her supporters loved her for it. They saw Jasmine as a refreshing antidote to establishment politics, a voice for marginalized communities, and someone unafraid to call out hypocrisy when she saw it. Social media amplified this narrative, portraying her as a modern-day disruptor, shaking the foundations of Washington's power structures. But opponents saw something else, a pattern. For every passionate speech, there was an outburst. For every fiery defense of her values, there was a personal attack that went too far. The viral moments that built her brand also built her vulnerabilities. In the weeks leading up to this showdown with Tulsi Gabbard, Jasmine had found herself at the center of several controversies. Her recent remarks on national security sparked bipartisan criticism, with even some of her usual allies urging restraint. In another heated interview, she dismissed a prominent journalist's question as ignorant, setting off a media firestorm that dominated news cycles for days. Each clash made her supporters cheer louder, but it also sharpened her critics' knives. And now, facing Tulsi, she believed she could rely on the same unfiltered fire that had carried her this far. What Jasmine didn't realize was that Tulsi wasn't like the others she had sparred with before. Tulsi wasn't easily rattled, and she wasn't here to trade soundbites for applause. Jasmine had built her brand on dominating the room, raising her voice, commanding attention, and throwing opponents off balance. It had worked against countless adversaries, but in this room, something was different. Tulsi wasn't blinking. Tulsi wasn't flinching. And for the first time in a long time, Jasmine was about to discover that her greatest strength could also become her greatest weakness. But this time, her usual tactics wouldn't work. Long before the flashing cameras, the trending hashtags, and the political firestorms, Tulsi Gabbard's story began thousands of miles away on the shores of Hawaii. Born into a family grounded in service, she grew up with the idea that leadership wasn't about titles or power, it was about responsibility. That belief would define her path, shaping a life driven by purpose rather than politics. When most of her peers were focused on careers and comfort, Tulsi chose a different road. At just 21, she became one of the youngest state legislators in Hawaii's history, but her real calling came not in a government chamber but on the battlefield. After the attacks of September 11th, Tulsi enlisted in the Hawaii Army National Guard, determined to serve her country directly. While others debated policy from air-conditioned offices, Tulsi deployed to a war zone. The desert heat was relentless, the risks constant, but the experience forged a steel within her that few in Washington would ever understand. It taught her discipline, composure, and the importance of making decisions when lives hang in the balance. Those who served alongside her described Tulsi as unshakable, someone who led not with volume but with clarity. In moments of chaos, she didn't shout commands. She gave direction. When fear rippled through the ranks, she steadied those around her. And when faced with danger, she stepped forward instead of back. That quiet strength followed her into politics. By her early 30s, Tulsi had been elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, representing Hawaii's 2nd District. In Washington, she was different from the start. She wasn't driven by party loyalty or ideological extremes. Instead, Tulsi developed a reputation as an independent thinker, unafraid to challenge her own party when she believed the people's interests demanded it. Some called her unpredictable. Others called her fearless. In a political era dominated by soundbites and outrage cycles, Tulsi carved out her own lane, calm, deliberate, and relentless in pursuit of facts over theatrics. She didn't interrupt, she didn't grandstand, and she didn't chase viral moments. Instead, she built her influence on substance, letting her work and her record speak louder than her words. But independence came at a cost. Tulsi often found herself at odds with party leadership, and while many respected her courage, others saw her as a disruptor. She became a lightning rod in national debates, praised by those who valued her integrity and criticized by those who preferred conformity. To her supporters, Tulsi embodied something rare, a leader who didn't bend under pressure. They saw in her the discipline of a soldier, the empathy of a public servant, and the clarity of someone who refused to compromise her principles for political gain. And that's exactly what made her dangerous to opponents like Jasmine Crockett. Jasmine thrived on chaos, feeding off volatility and dominance. Tulsi thrived on precision, letting opponents exhaust themselves while she waited, patient and calculating, for the moment when calm would overpower noise. That moment was now approaching. In the days leading up to the hearing, Tulsi had studied every detail, every policy inconsistency, every contradictory statement, every public outburst Jasmine had made. She knew the facts inside and out, and she understood something Jasmine didn't. This wasn't about personality, it was about credibility. Tulsi walked into the chamber with quiet confidence, not to destroy her opponent but to defend a principle, that public service meant putting people above ego. For Tulsi, this wasn't just another committee hearing. It wasn't even about Jasmine, it was about the deeper promise she'd made long ago, to serve with dignity, to speak truth even when unpopular, and to stand firm when the stakes were highest. And on this day, her resolve would be tested like never before. The tension inside the chamber had reached a breaking point. The air was thick, humming with anticipation, every second stretching longer than the last. Tulsi Gabbard leaned slightly toward the microphone, her calm, measured tone cutting through the static of murmurs around her. The responsibility we have to the American people is, spare us the lecture. Tulsi, Jasmine Crockett's voice, exploded across the room, sharp and unyielding. She slammed her hand on the table, leaning forward with the kind of force that demanded attention. Gasps erupted from the audience. Reporters instinctively jerked upright, pens frozen midst, cameras snapping wildly to capture the moment. The panel chair raised an eyebrow but said nothing, knowing there was no stopping what was about to unfold. Tulsi stopped speaking but didn't recoil. Her face remained composed, her hands resting lightly on the desk in front of her. She didn't blink every time you open your mouth. Jasmine continued, her voice rising. You try to make yourself sound like some kind of saint, but let's be real, you've been playing both sides for years. Tulsi, people like you don't stand for anyone. The words landed like punches, and the murmurs in the room grew louder. Several reporters exchanged knowing glances, already drafting headlines in their heads. Crockett clashes with Gabbard live. Tulsi took a slow, deliberate breath. The silence from her side was deafening, almost unnerving. For the first time, Jasmine hesitated, sensing her attacks weren't landing the way she expected. Then Tulsi raised her gaze and fixed it on Jasmine, sharp, steady, and unshaken. Jasmine, she said softly, her voice low enough that the room had to lean in to hear, this isn't about me, and it isn't about you, it's about the people we serve. Jasmine scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Please don't try to hide behind the people. We all know what you're doing here. Another Tulsi Gabbard publicity stunt. Reporters leaned forward even more, sensing blood in the water. The audience shifted, whispers growing louder with each passing second. But Tulsi remained unbothered. She folded her hands together, the faintest trace of a smile flickering at the corner of her lips. You think this is about publicity? Tulsi replied, still steady, still calm. You've been making headlines with shouting matches and sound. Jasmine, that may work on social media, but here, facts still matter. A low ripple of murmurs swept through the room. Jasmine's jaw tightened. Facts, she shot back. You want to talk about facts? Let's talk about your record. Tulsi, let's talk about the decisions you've made that hurt the very communities you claim to represent. The words hit hard. The crowd tensed, but Tulsi didn't break eye contact, didn't move, didn't so much as shift in her chair. Instead, she let the silence do the talking. Every second that passed pulled the audience deeper into the standoff, the suspense building until it felt unbearable. You could hear the faint clicking of camera shutters, the quiet hum of reporters whispering to their editors, and the distant echo of someone coughing nervously in the gallery. Finally, Tulsi leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow commanding the room. Jasmine, she said, if you really want to talk about records, we can do that. Jasmine blinked, caught off guard by the controlled precision in Tulsi's tone. The room froze, sensing the shift in power, and then Tulsi leaned in, and the room went silent. For a heartbeat, the chamber held its breath. Tulsi Gabbard leaned forward, her calm presence swallowing the chaos that had erupted just moments earlier. Jasmine Crockett sat across from her, chin lifted, smirk intact, still confident, still believing this was her arena. But Tulsi was about to change the entire game. She spoke softly at first, forcing the room to lean in. You've accused me of playing both sides, Jasmine, but let's set the record straight. She paused, while you were calling press conferences to make headlines. Tulsi lifted a single page from a thick folder beside her. I was on the ground, drafting bipartisan legislation that actually passed. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras zoomed closer, and a handful of congressional aides exchanged startled glances. Jasmine tried to cut in. Legislation that Tulsi didn't flinch, didn't even raise her voice. Let me finish. The firmness in her tone was surgical, sharp enough to silence even Jasmine. Tulsi placed the document flat on the table and tapped it once with her index finger. This bill secured funding for veterans' mental health support. Those men and women served our country. They came home carrying wounds you'll never see. And while you were staging viral outbursts, I was making sure they got the care they deserved. The chamber went quiet. Even the constant clicking of cameras slowed. Tulsi continued, her voice steady, deliberate, relentless. You call me inconsistent, but I've stood by the same principles since day one. Service above self, people over party. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air like smoke. Jasmine opened her mouth to respond, but hesitated. That hesitation said more than words ever could. Then Tulsi shifted gears. Her tone sharpened, her cadence quickened, each sentence striking like a drumbeat. You've turned every committee hearing into a personal battlefield. You've mocked colleagues, weaponized outrage, and chased soundbites instead of solutions. Washington doesn't need another political celebrity, Jasmine. It needs leaders willing to do the hard work. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A reporter whispered audibly, she's dismantling her. Jasmine's jaw tightened, and she fired back, oh, so now you're the savior of Washington. Please, everyone knows you flip-flopped when it suited you. Tulsi leaned back slightly, folding her hands. She waited. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3. Then, with surgical precision, you're right. I did change my stance when the facts changed. That's called leadership. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions to each other. Someone in the back audibly muttered, oh my God. And then it started the live tweets. At Political Pulse, Tulsi Gabbard is slicing Jasmine Crockett apart, point by point. This is a masterclass at INSIDEDC. The calm versus chaos dynamic is insane. Tulsi's silence is louder than Jasmine's shouting. At Memes for Democracy, Crockett's face RN equals when you studied for the wrong test. Within minutes, clips of the exchange were already circulating. One in particular, Tulsi tapping the veterans bill, was spreading like wildfire under the caption, receipts greater than rants. Back inside the chamber, Jasmine tried once more to regain control. She leaned forward, pointing an accusatory finger at Tulsi. Don't act like you're above this. Tulsi, you've cozied up to people who stand against everything you claim to represent. Tulsi nodded slowly, almost as if agreeing, but her eyes never left Jasmine's. Funny, you should say that, she replied, lowering her voice just enough to draw everyone closer. Because I've worked with both sides to deliver results for Americans while you've alienated half the chamber. That landed hard. You could feel the shift. Jasmine's usual swagger faltered. Her expression hardened, but her confidence cracked, subtle, but visible. Tulsi pressed forward. Voice firm, deliberate, unstoppable now. Leadership isn't about who yells the loudest. It's about who listens the closest. It's not about branding yourself as the people's champion. It's about actually showing up for them when the cameras aren't rolling. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Even members, seated behind Jasmine, began shifting uncomfortably, and then Tulsi paused. Just paused. The silence dragged 4, 5, 6, 7 seconds. Long enough for every camera to zoom in. Long enough for Twitter to explode again. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice like steel. Jasmine, you've built a platform on outrage. But here's the truth, no one's told you yet. Outrage doesn't solve problems. Results do. Boom. The gallery gasped. Several reporters mouthed the same word silently. Wow. Jasmine tried one last time to interrupt, but her voice cracked as she spoke. You think you're better than Tulsi, raised a hand gently, stopping her mid-sentence without even touching her. This isn't about being better. It's about being accountable. The line landed like a sledgehammer. Jasmine sat back slowly, lips pressed tight, eyes darting as if searching for a comeback. But there was none. The cameras caught everything. The freeze-frame-worthy moments. Tulsi's composed expression. Jasmine's shifting demeanor. The audience hanging on every syllable. And then. The moment came. Tulsi reached for a final document, sliding it across the table without a word. The header glared under the lights. Ethics Committee Review. Reporters scrambled to capture the shot. Jasmine's eyes widened slightly, just for a second, but enough for everyone watching to notice. Tulsi didn't explain it. She didn't need to. The silence said everything. And just when everyone thought Tulsi was done, she dropped one last bombshell. Asterisk, by the time the gavel struck and the hearing adjourned. Washington wasn't just buzzing, it was shaking. The clip of Tulsi sliding the Ethics Committee review document across the table had detonated online like political dynamite. Within minutes, hashtags surged globally. Hashtag TULSI. Takedown. Hashtag Jasmine shook. Hashtag receipts. VSRANTS. Twitter became a battlefield. Progressive voters, moderates, and even disillusioned conservatives flooded the timeline, each side claiming victory, each side rewriting the narrative in real time. At the Patriot Post, Tulsi just obliterated. JasmineCrockett.com. calculated, devastating. Hashtag TULSI, takedown at Blue Wave Nation. Tulsi's receipts were, but let's not pretend her alliances aren't messy. Stay woke. Hashtag Jasmine shook. At Memes for Democracy, that folder hit harder than a Supreme Court ruling. Hashtag receipts, vs RANTS, within an hour. The hearing wasn't just a headline, it was the headline. Every cable network cut into programming, scrambling to analyze every second of Tulsi's takedown and Jasmine's reaction. On CNN, political analyst Marissa Dalton leaned forward in disbelief. This wasn't just a clash of personalities, this was a clash of philosophies. Tulsi came prepared with receipts. Jasmine underestimated her, and it showed. On Fox News, pundits called it a masterclass in composure. Over on MSNBC, progressive commentators admitted Tulsi's performance was surgical, even as they questioned her motives. But the reaction wasn't one-sided. Jasmine's supporters rallied fast, launching hashtag Stand with Crockett, painting Tulsi as calculated, opportunistic, and playing into right-wing talking points. The country was divided not just by policy, but by personality. Celebrities jumped into the fray. Actor Mark Ruffalo tweeted, "This moment shows why dignity matters." Tulsi didn't yell, she delivered. Hashtag leadership. Meanwhile, activist Brittany Packnett countered, "This isn't about who won a viral moment. It's about protecting progress." Jasmine fights, Tulsi calculos. Don't confuse strategy with service. By nightfall, the clip had racked up 22 million views across platforms. TikTok edits turned Tulsi's quiet finger tap on the veterans bill into a meme titled, "When you bring receipts to a rant fight." YouTube reaction videos flooded topics. Podcasters devoted emergency episodes. And Washington went into crisis mode. Staffers from both camps worked overtime, crafting statements, spinning narratives, and preparing for the next news cycle. Jasmine's team released a fiery statement accusing Tulsi of grandstanding and weaponizing personal attacks for clicks. Tulsi's camp responded minutes later, doubling down. Tulsi Gabbard doesn't need soundbites, she brings solutions, always has, always will. Behind closed doors, congressional aides whispered that the Ethics Committee review wasn't just symbolic, it hinted at something bigger. Rumors swirled of potential investigations, growing fractures within party leadership, and a looming showdown on Capitol Hill. By morning, every major outlet led with the same headline, Tulsi versus Jasmine, the clash that shook Washington. Editorials framed it as a turning point. Opinion pieces debated whether Tulsi's.com dismantling marked the rise of a new political force or the deepening of partisan divides. And yet, beyond the headlines, something deeper was shifting, an undercurrent of uncertainty. For Tulsi, the viral moment had elevated her profile to historic heights. For Jasmine, it was a bruising defeat, but one that galvanized her base like never before. The battle lines had been drawn. The stakes had multiplied. And the nation, glued to their screens, waited for what came next. Because everyone knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The dust was still settling. But Tulsi Gabbard didn't wait for applause. She didn't bask in the viral fame, the trending hashtags, or the millions of views. Instead, she stood at the edge of the committee chamber, hands clasped, and spoke. Not just to Jasmine Crockett, but to the country watching. Her voice was calm, steady, deliberate. This was never about me. And it's not about Jasmine, it's about us, all of us. The people we serve. The room fell silent. Reporters froze mid-keystroke. Cameras stopped zooming on Jasmine's tightened jaw and focused instead on Tulsi's unwavering gaze. "We can't keep yelling at each other and pretending that's leadership," she said softly. "We can't keep chasing outrage while ignoring solutions. And we can't keep letting ego be louder than service." She paused, letting the words breathe. This isn't about who wins a viral moment. It's about who actually delivers for the people who trusted us with their voices. Outside the chamber, a handful of staffers stopped scrolling through Twitter and leaned closer to the live stream. Viewers around the country sat up. The shouting was over. Something deeper was happening. Tulsi took a measured step forward. Dignity matters more than disrespect. Truth matters more than noise. Service matters more than ego. Each line landed like a drumbeat, carving its way into the moment. Across social media, the tone began to shift. Hashtags evolved. What started as hashtag TULSI takedown and hashtag Jasmine shook gave rise to a new one. Hashtag respect still matters. Clips of Tulsi's quiet, composed statements began to overshadow the fiery exchanges. Commentators noted how she'd reframed the confrontation into something bigger, a reflection of what people longed for, civility, solutions, and hope. But Tulsi wasn't finished. "In a divided America," she said, scanning the chamber, "we've forgotten something simple. Disagreement doesn't make us enemies. Debate isn't war. And leadership isn't about tearing each other down. It's about lifting people up." Gasps rippled through the audience, not from shock, this time, but from recognition. She held up the Veterans Bill once more, tapping it lightly with her finger. "This is why we're here. Not for headlines. not for clout, not to go viral. We're here to serve. And if we can't put dignity before ego, then we don't deserve the trust of the people who sent us here. Her words echoed across the chamber, spilling into the hallways, and out onto millions of screens nationwide. By the next morning, editorial boards framed the moment as a turning point. Politico called it a rare moment of clarity in Washington's chaos. The New York Times ran a headline that simply read, "Respect still matters." Celebrities, influencers, and everyday Americans shared the clip with captions like, "Finally, someone said it. This is the energy we need. Truth, service, dignity." Even some of Jasmine's fiercest supporters, without abandoning her, acknowledged the weight of Tulsi's message. Because, for once, the debate wasn't about winning or losing. It wasn't about left or right. It wasn't about hashtags or viral memes. It was about something deeper, something Americans, regardless of politics, could still believe in. And in that rare moment, amid all the chaos, all the noise, all the division, one thing became clear. Respect still matters. Asterisk, the hearing was over. The microphones were off. But the echoes of that clash were just beginning. Tulsi Gabbard had challenged Jasmine Crockett calmly, surgically, unapologetically, and America watched every second unfold. The tension, the documents, the silence, the bombshells. And now, the country is split. Some say Tulsi delivered a masterclass in leadership, measured, composed, unshaken. Others believe Jasmine's fiery passion still speaks for those who feel unheard. But one thing's undeniable. This moment shook Washington, and it's not going away anytime soon. Millions have seen the clip. Millions more are talking about it, and now, it's your turn. Whose side are you on? Tulsi's calm precision, Jasmine's unapologetic fire. Or do you believe America deserves better than both? Your voice matters here. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Not tomorrow, not later, right now. Let Washington know you're watching. Let them know you care. And if you want to stay ahead of the chaos, the drama, and the moments shaping America's future, subscribe. Now, we've got more explosive political showdowns, more untold stories, and more behind the scenes, revelations you won't find anywhere else. This isn't just a channel. This is a community, a movement, a front row seat to history as it unfolds. Because if this moment proved anything, it's this. The voices of the people still have power. So, whose side are you on? Tell us, be heard, and buckle up. The next showdown is closer than you think.